My name is Aria Vance. I'm 34, and I founded Etherian Dynamics. When my father asked me to his 60th birthday gala at the Pinnacle Club, a part of me hoped for a different outcome. Despite creating a company worth $1 billion, I've consistently been the black sheep of the family, a role my brother Griffin especially enjoyed reminding me of. That evening, they had me seated on a secluded terrace by myself, while the main celebration unfolded inside. The terrace is for the B-list Aria, Griffin smirked. They had no idea my ride was already on its way, and it wasn't a taxi. Life has a funny way of handing you the perfect moment to redefine your story. If that feeling strikes a chord, if you've ever felt invisible to the very people who should see you most clearly, make sure you subscribe and give this a like. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from, and if you've ever had that one moment where you finally got to show them all what you're made of. Now, let's rewind to where this all started. I was raised in Greenwich, Connecticut, a place where your value was calculated by your Ivy League acceptance letter and the health of your stock portfolio. My father, Arthur Vance, wasn't just another executive at Sterling Pierce Capital. He was a titan of Wall Street. His roadmap to a worthy life was etched in stone. A Yale education, a career in finance, membership at the Wright Country Club, and a sprawling colonial estate in the most exclusive part of town. My mother, Eleanor, was the perfect partner in this vision, a master of quiet diplomacy who chaired charity auctions and ran tennis leagues. She was a gentle soul, but her kindness was wrapped in passivity, always yielding to my father's judgment on every issue, large or small. Whenever friction arose, she would smooth over the surface rather than dare to explore the cracks beneath. And then there was Griffin, my brother, 4 years my senior and a perfect echo of my father. From his earliest days, he walked the path paved for him, captain of the polo team, summer stints at Dad's firm, and a guaranteed spot at Yale. He absorbed our father's approval like a desert soaks up rain, and in doing so, he inherited every one of his beliefs and biases. I, on the other hand, was wired differently. While Griffin was out on the golf course, networking with the sons of my father's colleagues, I was in the basement, soldering a custom circuit board to see if I could make it work. When I was 12, I built my first real project, a small, wheeled robot that delivered a single rose to my mother for her birthday. Dad called it tinkering with gadgets. Mom found it charming, but utterly impractical. Gadgets are a fine hobby, Aria, my father would lecture, but a real career is forged in the world of finance, law, or medicine. By the time we hit high school, the chasm between us was undeniable. Griffin was student body president on his way to Yale. I was the brilliant but quirky girl who spent her weekends building websites for local shops, my sights set on Carnegie Mellon. At my high school graduation dinner, my father raised a toast to Griffin for his patient guidance of his eccentric little sister. At 18, I had already become a footnote in my own family's history. College only stretched the distance between us. While Griffin was joining Dad's old fraternity and networking with the future kings of Wall Street, I was flourishing at Carnegie Mellon, pursuing a double major in computer science and business. I made the dean's list every single semester, but back home, my accomplishments were barely mentioned at family functions. "It's a very respectable technical school," Dad would explain to his friends, his tone implying it was a runner-up prize for failing to get into the Ivy League. The true fracture occurred after we graduated. Griffin stepped into a vice president role at Sterling Pierce that had conveniently become available the moment he received his diploma. I, in contrast, rejected 6 lucrative corporate offers to launch Etherian Dynamics with my roommate Chloe and 2 of our classmates. Griffin called it my little science fair project, a phase I'd get over before I had to join the real world. My parents' reaction was a cocktail of bewilderment and anxiety. "Darling, wouldn't it be wiser to gain some experience at a more established firm first?" Mom suggested, her voice laced with concern. Dad was, as always, more blunt. "No Vance has ever worked for a startup. We build legacies at institutions." Those first few years were a grueling test of will. While Griffin was celebrating the purchase of his first Porsche and a penthouse in downtown Manhattan, I was sharing a cramped apartment with 3 other people, surviving on instant noodles and pure adrenaline, and pulling 20-hour days fueled by cheap coffee. At Christmas, Griffin would flaunt his new Rolex while I attempted to articulate our latest software innovation to a room of blank stares. "She does something with the internet," Dad would vaguely offer when his friends inquired about my work. The most difficult part wasn't the relentless work or the financial precariousness. It was the unwavering wall of doubt that radiated from my own family. Every holiday dinner, every birthday, became a test of my emotional fortitude. Griffin's promotions were met with popping champagne corks. My company hitting its first million in revenue was met with, "But is that sustainable?" "Not everyone is meant for the traditional path," Mom would say, her attempt at a defense sounding more like a confirmation that I had chosen a lesser one. Griffin was far more direct in his cruelty. "Tech is a bubble, Arya," he'd lecture. "When it pops, I'm sure we can find a desk for you in the customer service department at the bank." 5 years into our journey, Ethurian secured a massive round of funding and began to gain serious momentum. Griffin simply had to find new ways to express his contempt. "Anyone can get venture capital money in this market," he'd say dismissively. "They're just throwing cash at anything with a .com in its name." When we landed our first Fortune 500 contract, he just shrugged. "They're probably just trying to meet some diversity quota by hearing a company run by a woman." Mom would always try to play the peacemaker, offering empty phrases like, "Both of my children are so successful in their own unique ways," as if we were competing in entirely different sports. The last family gathering before Dad's 60th had been Thanksgiving, 6 months prior. By that point, Ethurian had expanded to over 200 employees, with offices in 3 major cities. We had been profiled in both Fast Company and Forbes. And yet, when I walked through the door, it was as if nothing had changed. "How's your little startup coming along?" Dad asked, the same tired question he'd been asking for 8 years. Later that evening, as we were served dessert, a news alert flashed on the television. One of our main competitors had just been acquired for $2 billion. "Lucky timing for that whole industry," Griffin commented, not even looking at me. "You should ride that wave while it lasts, Arya." I left early that night. Sitting in my car, a quiet resolution formed within me. I would give them one final chance at my father's 60th birthday. I would attend, be the gracious daughter, and leave the door open for a new kind of relationship. But if the script remained unchanged, I would finally have to accept that my family might never truly see me, and I would have to stop seeking an approval that would never come. I had no idea just how profoundly that resolution was about to be put to the test. The invitation for my father's 60th birthday arrived in early May, printed on thick ivory cardstock with gold leaf lettering. It was organized by my mother, of course, with her typical flawless attention to social protocol. Black tie optional, it read, "For an evening at the Pinnacle Club," one of the city's most exclusive rooftop restaurants. My name was written in my mother's perfect, flowing cursive. The moment I received it, I called Chloe. "You can't be seriously thinking about going," she said, her tone incredulous as soon as I told her. As my best friend and COO, She had a front row seat to my family's dysfunctional dynamics for years. It's his 60th, Chloe. It's a major milestone. Arya, every time you go to one of these things, you come back completely shattered. Remember last Thanksgiving? You were practically catatonic for a day. I sighed, flipping the heavy card over in my hands. Maybe this time will be different. Our latest valuation is just shy of $1 billion. They can't keep acting like I'm running some charming little side project. They've been acting that way for almost a decade, she countered. Your brother could watch you cure a disease, and he'd just call it playing with test tubes. Despite her very valid warnings, I made the decision to go. Maybe it was a flicker of hope, or maybe it was just a form of self-punishment, but I checked the will attend box on the RSVP card and sent it back. That very same week, Etherian entered into preliminary discussions to acquire Cognidata, a data analytics company whose technology would be a perfect complement to our services. The price tag for the acquisition was $1.2 billion, by far the biggest move in our company's history. As the negotiations intensified, my team scheduled a crucial board meeting for the exact same weekend as my father's birthday party. I can handle both, I insisted when my executive team floated the idea of rescheduling. The party is on Saturday night. We can do our final prep on Friday, and I'll fly back for the board meeting Sunday morning. In the weeks that followed, I planned for the evening with surgical precision. I purchased a Valentino gown, elegant enough to satisfy my parents' conservative tastes, but with a modern structure that felt like my own. I found a rare first edition book on the history of finance for my father, a thoughtful gift that didn't scream desperation for his approval. Meanwhile, the Cognidata deal was becoming more intricate. Our main competitor, Omnicorp, had started sniffing around, showing interest in the same firm. What began as a simple acquisition was quickly escalating into a potential bidding war. 3 days before the party, I had my regular session with Dr. Albright, my therapist of 4 years. "What is your ideal outcome for this dinner?" she asked. "Acknowledgement," I replied after a moment of thought. "Not necessarily praise or even approval, just an acknowledgement that what I've built has value. And if you don't get that, then I stop trying," I said. "I finally accept that they are incapable of seeing me clearly, and I stop giving them the power to make me feel small." She nodded slowly. "That's a very healthy boundary. How will you protect yourself if the old dynamics start to play out?" We rehearsed my responses to likely scenarios. If Griffin made a snide remark, I would simply acknowledge his point of view without getting defensive. If my father belittled my work, I would steer the conversation to a new topic instead of trying to win him over. The objective wasn't to win a fight, but to preserve my own peace. The day before the party, I flew into New York. Instead of staying at my parents' sprawling estate as they expected, I checked into the Mandarin Oriental. I needed a neutral space, a sanctuary I could retreat to if the evening went south. My mother called while I was unpacking. "Darling, we're so thrilled you're coming. It will mean the world to your father." "I'm looking forward to it," I lied, my voice smooth and polite. "Griffin and Amanda will be there. Oh, did you hear their news? They're expecting. You're going to be an aunt by Christmas." "That's fantastic news," I said, consciously ignoring the familiar sting of being lapped once again. Another major life event for Griffin. Another topic of conversation at dinner that would exclude me. "And all of your father's partners will be there," she continued. "The Blakemores, the Sullivans, the Whittingtons. All people who knew Griffin intimately and knew me only as a name." That night, while reviewing acquisition documents in my hotel suite, I got a text from Leo, our CFO. "Omnicorp made a direct approach to the Cognidata board. We need to discuss a counter strategy ASAP." I called him right away. and we spent the next hour mapping out how to protect the deal. By the time we hung up, it was obvious the situation was becoming critical. Omnicorp was making an aggressive play. "We should have daily check-ins on this," Leo advised. "This could all change in a matter of hours." "Agreed," I said. "I'll call you tomorrow after the dinner." As I got ready for bed, I went through a series of deep breathing exercises, trying to quiet my racing mind. I was split in two, half of my brain consumed by the brewing corporate battle, the other half dreading the family drama that awaited me. The next morning, I awoke to a flurry of new texts about Cogni Data. Their CEO wanted a direct conversation with me. Omnicorp had unofficially sweetened their offer. Our legal team needed my input on just how far we were willing to push our own offer. I managed what I could before I started getting ready for the dinner, attempting to build a wall between my business anxieties and my family issues. As I applied my makeup with practiced precision, I gave myself one last pep talk in the mirror. "You are the founder and CEO of a company valued at nearly $1 billion. You are responsible for hundreds of employees. You are on the verge of executing the largest acquisition in your industry this year. Nothing that is said over a dinner table can diminish that." I almost believed it. The Pinnacle Club was a beacon of polished elegance as my car pulled up at exactly 7:00 p.m. The restaurant crowned a sleek skyscraper in Midtown, its entrance subtly marked by a discreet plaque and a doorman who moved with quiet efficiency. "Good evening, Ms. Vance," the valet said as I exited the car. His use of my name caught me off guard until I realized he must have seen it on the reservation list. "You're the founder of Etherian Dynamics, right? I read that feature on you in Business Insider last month. It's incredible what you've built." I thanked him, feeling a brief surge of confidence. At least someone in this city recognized what I had accomplished. The maitre d' welcomed me with professional warmth, his eyes scanning the guest list. "Ah, yes, Ms. Vance for the Arthur Vance party. They have already been seated. If you'll please follow me." As we walked through the main dining room, I saw my family right away. They were at the largest table, positioned perfectly in the center of the room. The power table, as my father would call it. I could see the back of Griffin's head, his arm resting possessively on his wife Amanda's shoulder. My mother was smiling at something one of my father's partners was saying. My father was at the head of the table, looking every inch the king, celebrating 60 years of his reign. But the maitre d' wasn't leading me toward them. Instead, he was guiding me to the right, toward a side door. "I believe my family is over there," I said, gesturing toward the central table. He looked visibly uncomfortable. "I was given very specific instructions for your seating, Ms. Vance. Please, right this way." My confusion began to curdle into a dreadful understanding as he led me through a set of glass doors and onto the restaurant's outdoor terrace. In a far corner, partially hidden behind a large decorative plant, was a single, small table. From this vantage point, I could barely even see my family through the reflective glass. "There has to be a mistake," I said, my voice tight. "I do apologize, but I was told explicitly by Mr. Vance, the younger Mr. Vance, that you were to be seated on the terrace." As I stood there, trying to absorb the calculated cruelty of this, the glass door slid open. Griffin stepped out, a champagne flute held loosely in his hand. "There you are, Arya. Glad you could make it." His smile was a thin, cold line. "Griffin, why am I sitting out here by myself?" He gave a dismissive shrug. "Ran out of space. Dad invited a few more partners than we expected." He paused, taking a slow, deliberate sip of champagne. "The terrace is for the B-list. We need the main table for the people who actually matter." The casual brutality of his words stole my breath. Even after all the years of his put-downs, this public act of humiliation felt like a new level of coldness. "This is Dad's 60th birthday dinner. I should be at the table with the family," I said, my voice shaking slightly despite my efforts to keep it steady. "Mom suggested that," he admitted, but Dad agreed it would be less complicated this way. His colleagues want to talk about the new Sterling-Pierce merger, and we wouldn't want to bore you with actual business talk. Before I could formulate a response, my mother appeared at his side, her face a canvas of guilt and indecision. "Arya, darling, you made it." She leaned in for an air kiss that didn't quite land. "I am so sorry about this seating mess. I tried to tell your father it wasn't right, but you know how he gets once the arrangements are set." She was playing her lifelong role, apologizing for the problem without doing a single thing to fix it. "It's fine, Mom," I lied. "I'm quite used to being an afterthought." Her expression fell. "Oh, don't say that, sweetheart. We're so happy you're here. I'll come out and sit with you after the appetizers." We both knew it was a promise she wouldn't keep. The waiter assigned to the terrace looked deeply embarrassed on my behalf. "May I get you something to drink, Miss Vance?" he asked, his voice gentle. "A bottle of your finest Cabernet," I replied. If I'm going to be exiled, I might as well make his expense account bleed. As I sat down at my lonely table, I had a perfect, soundless view of the celebration through the glass. My father was now on his feet, raising his glass for a toast. Everyone at the table was captivated, the ideal audience for the Arthur Vance show. Griffin sat at his right hand, the crown prince in waiting. My mother beamed at her husband with a look of practiced devotion. I poked at my sea bass and sipped my $900 wine, watching the perfect scene of family joy play out without me. Every so often, Mom would cast a guilty look in my direction, but she never made a move to come outside. At one point, one of Dad's partners seemed to ask about me. I saw him gesture toward the terrace, but Dad just gave a short reply and a dismissive wave of his hand that shut down the conversation. There were only 2 other tables occupied on the terrace. Both were couples who were clearly unhappy about being seated outside on the cool summer evening. They kept shooting me curious looks, likely wondering what crime I had committed to deserve solitary confinement. I thought about just leaving. Every passing minute was a fresh reminder of how utterly insignificant my presence was to them. I had a perfectly valid excuse. The Cognidata situation was urgent. I could just walk away, go back to my hotel, and deal with real problems instead of enduring this ritualistic shamming. But my pride kept me glued to the chair. Leaving now would just give Griffin the victory he wanted. I decided I would stay through the main course, maintain my composure, and then make a quiet, dignified exit. I was half-heartedly picking at my dessert, a chocolate lava cake that tasted like dust, when my phone started buzzing insistently inside my clutch. The relentless vibration of my phone sliced through the fog of my humiliation. 3 texts from Leo, 2 from our lead counsel, Maya, and 4 missed calls. My stomach clenched as I read the first message. Urgent, Omnicorp made a formal offer to Cognidata. $1.4 billion. Their CEO flying in tonight. Need immediate guidance. The second text provided more details. Cognidata board meeting at 9:00 p.m. to review the offer. They want to hear our counter before they make a decision. My contact says we need a formal proposal in their hands within 2 hours. I pushed my chair back and walked to the far corner of the terrace to get some privacy. I dialed Leo immediately. "What's the situation?" I asked the second he picked up. "It's moving incredibly fast, Arya. Omnicorp caught us completely off guard. They're offering all cash, no strings attached." "But our integration plan is far superior," I argued. "We've demonstrated exactly how their tech will become the core of our platform." Strategic value doesn't always beat a mountain of cash. Their CEO, Anderson, wants to speak with you directly. He respects you, says he'll give us a fair shot to counter, but he needs to hear it from you tonight. I glanced at my watch. It was 8:42 p.m. when and where. His corporate jet lands at 10:30. They've reserved the main conference room at the Mandarin Oriental for 11:00. The board wants our final offer on the table by midnight. My mind was a whirlwind of calculations. This acquisition was the culmination of years of work. It was the seamless integration of our technologies, a customer base that would dramatically expand our market share, and a pool of talent we could never hope to replicate. Losing this deal would set us back years and hand our biggest rival an almost insurmountable lead. "I'll be there," I said. "Are you sure? I know it's your dad's birthday." "I'm sure. Start putting together the updated proposal. I want a comprehensive counteroffer ready for me when I get there. And Leo, let them know we're prepared to go to $1.5 billion with the earnout structure we talked about." As I hung up, I saw Griffin walking toward me across the terrace, his face a mask of disapproval. "Seriously, Arya? You're taking business calls in the middle of Dad's birthday party." I slid my phone back into my clutch. It was an important call. "Important?" he scoffed. "Can't you at least pretend to give a damn about Dad for one night? Or does your precious little startup always have to come first?" Before I could answer, the door opened again. This time it was my father, with my mother trailing behind him. From the thunderous look on his face, I knew Griffin had already filled him in. "Arya," Dad said, his voice laced with that familiar tone of deep disappointment, "your brother tells me you're conducting business during our celebration. I had to take an urgent call about an acquisition we're in the middle of." He let out a heavy sigh. "There's always some kind of drama with these little startups, isn't there? Constant chaos. In established institutions like Sterling Pierce, we handle business during business hours." After 8 years of building my company from the ground up, he still called it a little startup. The insult stung just as sharply as it always had. "It's a $1.5 billion acquisition, Dad. That's hardly little." He waved his hand, dismissing the number as if I'd invented it. "Well, whatever the amount, it can certainly wait until tomorrow. Tonight is supposed to be about family." The staggering irony of him saying that while I stood alone on the terrace was apparently completely lost on him. My mother touched his arm gently. "Arthur, maybe Arya's work really is urgent. More urgent than her father's 60th birthday. I highly doubt that." He turned his disappointed gaze back to me. "This is precisely why I have always been concerned about your career path, Arya. There's no stability, no proper structure. You're always chasing after the next fleeting thing." As he was speaking, my phone vibrated again. A text from Maya. "Cogni Data CEO specifically asked if you'll be at the meeting. Says his decision hinges on a direct conversation with you." In that instant, everything came into sharp focus. On one side of the scale was a father who had never once respected my life's work, who had banished me to a separate table like an embarrassing relative. On the other side was a billion-dollar company that I had poured my entire soul into building. A company full of people who relied on me, who trusted my leadership so completely that a deal of this magnitude depended on my personal involvement. "I have to leave," I said, getting up from my chair. "Leave?" Dad's eyebrows shot up. "You can't just walk out in the middle of my birthday dinner." "I'm not in the middle of your dinner, Dad. I'm on the fringes of it, which is exactly where you put me. And yes, I have to leave. My company is about to finalize the biggest acquisition in our industry this year, and my presence is required." Griffin snorted. "Always so dramatic." I gathered my clutch and my wrap. "I'm sorry that I can't stay. I truly hope you have a wonderful birthday, Dad." If you walk out that door now, Arya, you are making a very clear statement about your priorities. Dad said, his voice rigid. I looked him straight in the eye. Yes, I am. And if you had ever taken the time to come to a single one of my company's events, or read even one of the articles about what we've built, or asked me one single genuine question about my work, then maybe my priorities tonight would be different. My mother looked horrified. Arya, please don't. It's all right, Mom. I'm not angry. I'm just finally seeing things as they are. I leaned in and kissed her on the cheek. I'll call you tomorrow. As I walked toward the terrace exit, I sent a quick text to my private pilot, Marco. Need immediate pickup. Emergency business meeting. Current location, the Pinnacle Club. His reply came back in seconds. On it. Helicopter can land at the waterfront park, 5 blocks from your location. ETA 20 minutes. I paused at the door and looked back at my family. Enjoy the rest of the evening. My father had already turned his back on me, heading back to his guests. Griffin was whispering something to my mother, who looked torn between coming after me and staying with her husband. Neither of them said another word as I walked out of the restaurant. Once outside, I took a deep gulp of the cool night air. For the first time in hours, I felt like I could actually breathe. My phone buzzed again with updates from my team, and a small smile touched my lips as I read their messages. This was my team. These were the people who respected me, who saw my worth. I texted Marco, perfect, heading to the park now. As I walked quickly down the street, I felt an unfamiliar sense of lightness. I had finally made my choice, and there was no turning back. Whatever came next, I would face it as the CEO of Etherian Dynamics, not as Arthur Vance's disappointing daughter. I had just reached the edge of the waterfront park when I heard it, the unmistakable thumping sound of helicopter blades slicing through the city's hum. A few people on the sidewalk stopped and looked up, pointing toward the sky as the sound grew louder. Marco was nothing if not punctual. He must have been nearby when I sent the text, likely running maintenance checks at our Manhattan helipad. The sleek black helicopter, emblazoned with the glowing blue Etherian logo, was approaching from the south, its navigation lights blinking like stars against the night sky. For a fleeting moment, I considered the sheer spectacle of what was about to unfold and almost laughed out loud. If I had deliberately planned this as a way to make a statement, I couldn't have staged it any better. But this wasn't about making a point to them. This was about being exactly where I needed to be for my company. My phone rang. The restaurant's number, probably my mother. I declined the call and watched as the helicopter began its descent toward a clearing in the park. The wind from its rotors kicked up a small whirlwind of leaves and dust, startling the small crowd of onlookers that had begun to gather. As I walked toward the landing zone, another call came in. It was Griffin. This time I answered. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he yelled, his voice barely audible over the clatter of the restaurant. "I'm going to a business meeting, just like I told you." There is a helicopter landing in the park. People are saying it has your company's logo on it. That would be my ride, I said, my voice calm and even. The stunned silence on his end was deeply satisfying. You're sending a helicopter to Dad's birthday party. Have you lost your mind? I'm sending a helicopter to pick me up because I have a time-sensitive meeting about a billion-dollar acquisition. Dad's party is just a coincidence. Everyone is crowding at the windows watching this. You're making a scene. No, I'm handling a business emergency with efficiency. You can interpret it any way you like. I ended the call as I reached the edge of the park. Security personnel from the helicopter were already establishing a small perimeter, keeping the curious onlookers at a safe distance. Marco had landed flawlessly in the clearing. The Etherian logo was dramatically illuminated against the helicopter's dark frame. My phone was buzzing with texts, more from Griffin, one from my mother, and even one from my father. I ignored them all. This moment was no longer about them. As I got closer to the helicopter, I glanced back in the direction of the Pinnacle Club, several blocks away but still visible. Sure enough, I could see figures pressed against the restaurant's large windows. Even from this distance, I could make out the silhouettes of the dinner party, champagne glasses still in hand, watching the drama unfold. A member of the security team led me to the helicopter, shielding me from the powerful rotor wash. As I reached the door, it slid open to reveal not just Marco, but Leo and Maya as well. "Thought you might want a briefing on the way," Leo shouted over the roar of the engines, giving me a hand up. I buckled my seatbelt as Marco prepared for takeoff. Through the window, I could see that a small crowd had gathered, their phones held up to record the scene. In the distance, the restaurant's terrace, my place of exile, was now clearly visible, empty except for a waiter clearing away my uneaten dessert. As the helicopter ascended, my phone rang again. It was my father. After a brief hesitation, I answered and put it on speaker so my team could hear. "Arya, what is the meaning of this?" He was practically shouting, to be heard over the noise of the restaurant. "Like I said, Dad, I have an emergency business meeting. In a helicopter, you couldn't just take a taxi like a normal person. Time is of the essence. We're closing a major acquisition tonight." What kind of acquisition could possibly justify this spectacle? "We're acquiring Cognidata for $1.5 billion. Their CEO and board are waiting for me to finalize the terms. OmniCorp is trying to outbid us as we speak." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could almost picture him processing the numbers, the names of the companies, the sheer scale of what I was describing. "Cognidata," he finally said. "That's Martin Phillips's company." "Yes, you know Martin." "Of course I know Martin. Sterling Pierce handled their second round of funding years ago." His tone had shifted, the anger replaced by something that sounded like bewilderment. "They're worth over $1 billion now. $1.4 billion is OmniCorp's current offer. We're countering at $1.5 billion. More silence. I could hear a low murmur of voices in the background. My father's business partners, no doubt, who were suddenly very invested in this conversation. "And you're leading this acquisition, personally. I'm the CEO, Dad, that's my job." Leo gave me a thumbs up, clearly savoring the exchange. Maya was trying her best to suppress a smile. I had no idea your company was operating on that level," my father said at last. "I know, Dad. You never bothered to ask." The helicopter banked to the left, revealing a breathtaking panorama of Manhattan glittering below. In the distance, I could still see the Pinnacle Club, its terrace now fully visible from our new vantage point. "Well," Dad said, his voice stiffening again. "I suppose we can discuss this some other time. It seems you're busy." "Very, thank you for understanding." I paused, then added, "Happy birthday, Dad. I'm sorry I couldn't stay." I ended the call before he had a chance to reply. Leo immediately started a slow, deliberate clap. "That," he said, "was the most epic power move I have ever witnessed in my entire life." Maya was already opening her laptop. "Cognidata's lawyers just sent over the latest term sheet. We should review it before we land." As we soared over the city, I took one last look at the shrinking restaurant, now just one of countless points of light below. For so many years, I had craved validation from the people at that table, the people who were supposed to love me but who had never managed to truly see me. Now, flying literally and figuratively above it all, I felt a wave of freedom unlike anything I had felt since the day I founded Etherian. "Let's focus on the acquisition," I said, turning to my team. "We have a company to buy." The helicopter touched down on the rooftop helipad, of our Manhattan office building at 10:15 p.m. The second we landed, Leo handed me an updated briefing. Omnicorp raised their offer to $1.6 billion while we were in the air, he said, his expression grim. All cash, minimal conditions. Maya brought up the latest financial data on her tablet. If we match them at $1.6 billion, we'll have to restructure our entire financing plan. The banks will demand additional guarantees. As we took the elevator down to the executive floor, we debated our strategy. Our team had converted the main conference room into a command center, with multiple screens displaying financial models, integration blueprints, and competitive intelligence. CEOs on the floor, someone shouted as we walked in. The room, which was filled with about 30 people from our executive, legal, and finance teams, erupted in applause. Save the applause for after we close the deal, I said, but a smile broke through. This was my real family. These were the people who shared my vision and worked tirelessly beside me to make it a reality. Our CFO, Gregory, came over with new projections. If we push to $1.7 billion, we can still make the numbers work, but we'll have to adjust our earnout structure. I studied his figures. What if we offer $1.65 billion, but with accelerated payment terms and guaranteed positions for their key executives? That could be the key, he nodded. Their CEO is fiercely loyal to his people. For the next hour, we honed our strategy, pinpointing Omnicorp's weaknesses and leveraging our own strengths. Unlike our competitor, we could offer Cognidata a genuine partnership. Their technology would become the centerpiece of our platform, not just another asset to be stripped for parts. At 11:30 p.m., Martin Phillips and his team arrived. The CEO of Cognidata, a brilliant engineer who, like me, had built his company from scratch, looked weary but resolute. Arya, he said, shaking my hand firmly. I appreciate you making this happen on such short notice. I heard you had to leave a family event to be here. Some things are more important, I replied. This partnership is one of them. We moved into the boardroom to begin the formal presentations. My team was flawless, laying out our comprehensive vision for how the two companies would merge. Instead of trying to win a simple bidding war, we focused on the strategic advantage. We showed how our technologies were perfectly complementary. We demonstrated how our customer bases had almost no overlap. We painted a picture of how, together, we could disrupt the entire industry. You can take Omnicorp's money, I said to Martin directly. It's a substantial offer, and no one would fault you for it. But in 6 months, your technology will be dismantled and absorbed into their existing product lines. Your team will be scattered across their various divisions. Your vision will be erased. I brought up our integration plan on the main screen. With us, Cognidata doesn't just survive, it becomes a critical business unit. Your core technology becomes the engine for our next-generation platform. Your engineers will continue to innovate, but with our resources and global reach behind them. This isn't just an acquisition. It's a true fusion of complementary strengths. Martin looked thoughtfully at the screen, and then at the financial terms. I gave a nod to Gregory, who passed out our official offer documents. $1.65 billion in total value, with $1.2 billion in cash at closing, $450 million in Ethereum stock with no lockup period, an accelerated payment plan, and guaranteed executive roles with significant autonomy. Omnicorp is offering $1.6 billion in all cash, Martin pointed out. They're buying you to take you off the board, I countered. We're partnering with you to create something that neither of us could build on our own. The negotiations stretched past midnight as we delved into technical details, organizational charts, and financial forecasts. By 2:00 a.m., we had addressed every single one of their concerns, adjusted several key clauses, and reached a preliminary agreement on all the major points. At 3:17 a.m., Martin looked across the table at his team, who all nodded in assent. He reached his hand out to me. "We have a deal," he said. The room broke into a quiet, exhausted celebration, the sound of triumphant professionals who understood the monumental task we had just accomplished. While the legal teams started to draw up the final paperwork, I stepped out onto the terrace for a moment of peace. The city skyline glowed beneath me, most of its residents fast asleep, oblivious to the corporate saga that had just played out. My phone, which I had silenced hours ago, showed a long list of missed calls and texts from my family. I ignored them, choosing instead to focus on what we had just achieved. By the next morning, the acquisition was official. At 9:00 a.m., we held a joint press conference in our building's lobby. Cameras flashed as Martin, and I shook hands in front of the Etherian and Cogni data logos. "This strategic partnership creates a new powerhouse in the tech industry," I announced to the reporters. "Together, our companies will drive a new wave of innovation that neither of us could have achieved alone." The business media covered the story extensively, with several publications highlighting the unusual backdrop of the deal. Etherian CEO Aria Vance reportedly left her father's 60th birthday gala to personally broker the deal, arriving via corporate helicopter to seal the terms, wrote the Wall Street Journal. Bloomberg's headline was even more to the point. "From family dinner to billion-dollar deal, how Vance's dramatic exit led to tech's biggest acquisition of the year." When the market opened, our stock shot up by 12%. Analysts praised the strategic value of the deal and the decisive leadership that had secured it in the face of a competing offer from Omni Corp. By noon, my inbox was flooded with congratulatory messages from industry peers, board members, and investors. The only communication from my family was a short text from my mother. "We need to talk. Your father is very upset, but he's also confused. Please call when you have a moment." After the last press briefing, I went back to my hotel. The adrenaline that had been fueling me for the past day was finally starting to fade. In the quiet of my suite, I let myself fully absorb the emotional whiplash of the last 24 hours. From the stinging humiliation at the restaurant to the exhilarating triumph of the acquisition. "You did it," Chloe said when I called to give her the full story. "You won on both fronts, professionally and personally." "What do you mean?" "You proved your value on your own terms, and you finally stood up to your family in a way they couldn't possibly ignore." "The helicopter wasn't meant to be a statement," I insisted. "Maybe not consciously," she laughed, "but you have to admit it was one hell of a statement." After we hung up, I ordered room service and collapsed onto the bed, feeling completely drained, both physically and emotionally. For years, I had been working to build something of substance while simultaneously chasing my family's approval. In a single night, I had secured the future of my company and finally let go of the need for a validation that might never have come. As I was drifting off to sleep, my phone lit up with one more text. It was from my father. "We should discuss your company. It appears I have been uninformed about its significance." It wasn't an apology, and it wasn't quite an olive branch, but it felt like a potential beginning. I put the phone down without replying. Whatever happened next with my family, it would be on entirely different terms. I had finally chosen myself, and for the moment, that was more than enough. 2 weeks after the acquisition, my life settled back into its usual rhythm. The initial integration of Cogni data was going remarkably well. Our stock price had stabilized at its new, higher value, and the media buzz had moved on from the dramatic details of the deal to its long-term business implications. During this period, I kept my contact with my family to a deliberate minimum. My mother had called almost every day at first, her messages becoming more and more anxious. Griffin sent a couple of texts that swung between defensive excuses and grudging admissions that he might have been a bit harsh at the dinner. My father sent a single, formal email congratulating me on what he called a significant business achievement and suggesting we discuss it at an appropriate time. I responded to my mother with polite but brief replies, ignored Griffin completely, and sent my father a simple, "Thank you. I will be in touch when my schedule permits." Chloe had dubbed this my power move phase. "You're finally dealing with them from a position of strength," she noted. "Don't let them pull you back into the old dynamic." She was right. For the very first time, I wasn't desperately trying to patch things up or seek their validation. I was giving myself the space to decide what kind of relationship, if any, I actually wanted with them. On a Wednesday afternoon, my mother finally managed to get me on the phone. "Arya, we really need to discuss what happened," she said, her voice in its familiar peacemaker tone. "Your father's birthday party ended on a rather dramatic note." "Yes, it did," I agreed, offering no further explanation. "The helicopter. That was perhaps a little excessive, don't you think?" It was a necessary tool for an urgent business meeting. The timing was unfortunate, but it was not optional. She let out a soft sigh. "Darling, I know you were upset about the seating arrangement." "I wasn't upset, Mom. I was shown exactly where I stand in this family, and I acted accordingly. The helicopter would have been called no matter where I was sitting." "Your father has been processing things. The acquisition was featured in the Wall Street Journal. His colleagues have been calling him nonstop about it." So that was it. Not my success itself, but the recognition of my success by his peers. "I'm glad he's staying current on the news," I said, my tone neutral. "Could we please have lunch, just the two of us?" she asked. "I think it's time we talked face to face." I considered saying no, but I knew that avoidance wouldn't solve anything. "All right, Friday at Le Pain Quotidian near my office. Noon." When I arrived on Friday, I saw my mother already at an outdoor table. She looked more subdued than I was used to seeing her, dressed in simple slacks and a blouse instead of her usual country club uniform. She seemed on edge, nervously fidgeting with her water glass. "You look wonderful," she said as I sat down. "Success suits you." "Thank you, how are you?" "Oh, I'm managing. Your father has been challenging since the party, and not just about you, about everything." She began twisting her napkin in her hands. "Arya, I need to apologize to you." This was new. In my 34 years, I could hardly remember a time my mother had taken direct responsibility for anything unpleasant. "I should have fought for you to be seated with us," she said, her voice quiet. "I knew it was wrong, but I didn't want to cause a scene with your father and Griffin. I chose the path of least resistance, which is what I've done far too many times." I just nodded, letting her speak. "When I saw that helicopter landing in the park, it was as if I was seeing you for the first time. Not as my daughter who took a different road, but as this incredibly powerful businesswoman who commands that kind of respect." She looked down at her hands. "I realized in that moment how little I actually know about your life, about what you've accomplished." "You could have asked at any time in the last 8 years, Mom." "I know. I told myself I was just giving you your space, but the truth is, I didn't understand your world, so I just didn't try to." She reached her hand across the table. "I want to do better. I truly want to know my daughter." Her sincerity felt real. I would like that, Mom. As we ate our lunch, she asked me real questions. About Ethurian, about the acquisition, about what my day-to-day work was like. It was probably the first real conversation we had ever had about my career. Toward the end of the meal, she hesitated for a moment, then said, "Your father will never admit this to anyone, but he was completely floored by the scale of what you're doing." He looked up Etherian's valuation after you left. He had no idea. He never wanted to have an idea. That's starting to change. He is proud in his own way. He just has no idea how to express it after being so wrong about your choices for so long. Has he actually said that? That he was wrong? She offered a small, weary smile. You know your father. What he said was, perhaps Arya's unconventional approach had more merit than was immediately apparent. I couldn't help but laugh. It was so perfectly Arthur Vance, the closest he would ever get to an admission of error. He wants to visit your office, she added, to see what you've built with his own eyes. I considered her words. I'll think about it. In the weeks that followed, I began to set new boundaries with my family. I turned down invitations for Sunday dinners, but agreed to have lunch with my mother occasionally. I replied to my father's emails, but did not initiate contact myself. I continued to ignore Griffin until he sent a clumsy but seemingly genuine text of apology, after which I agreed to maintain a minimal, civil level of communication. At the same time, I focused on strengthening my connections with the people who had always been in my corner. Chloe and our founding team, the key employees who had shared our vision from the beginning, and the friends who had been my cheerleaders when my own family wouldn't. 1 month after the acquisition, I hosted a dinner party at my apartment for this chosen family. We raised our glasses not just to our business success, but to the real, authentic relationships that had carried us through the difficult years of building the company. To the people who see us for who we are, Chloe toasted, her words met with knowing laughter around the table. The next morning, my assistant buzzed my office. Your father is here. He doesn't have an appointment. I took a long, deep breath. Send him in. My father walked into my office with an uncharacteristic tentativeness, his eyes taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows, the industry awards on the shelves, the commanding view of the city. Impressive, he said, gesturing at the room. Very impressive. Thank you. What can I do for you, Dad? He sat down in the chair opposite my desk, looking out of place. I've been doing a lot of reflecting. About the birthday dinner, your company's acquisition, about the way I've viewed your career. I waited, letting the silence hang in the air. I have lived my life on a very specific track, he said slowly. Yale, banking, the traditional markers of success. When you chose a different way, I just assumed it was a mistake because it wasn't my way. Yes, you did. The Cogni-Data deal made me realize how narrow my perspective has been. Martin Phillips called me, you know. He said you were one of the most brilliant executives he had ever worked with. Martin is very generous. He's not generous, Arya. He's brutally honest. He always has been. My father straightened his tie. He told me I should be incredibly proud of you. And I realized that I am. I just never let myself feel it because that would have meant admitting that I was wrong about you. The admission, however indirect, was more than I had ever thought I would hear from him. I'm not here asking for you to forgive me for the birthday dinner or for anything else, he continued. But I am asking for a chance to understand what you've built here, to get to know the life my daughter actually leads, not the one I imagined for her. I studied him. Arthur Vance, the titan of Wall Street, admitting his own fallibility, however cautiously. It wasn't a complete reversal, but it was a start. I can give you a tour of the office, I offered. Introduce you to some of the team. A look of relief washed over his face. I would like that very much. As we walked through the bustling office, as I introduced him to our key people, showed him our technology, and explained our business model, I had a profound realization. For years, I had defined myself in opposition to my family, and especially to my father, driven to succeed to prove him wrong. Now, I understood that my value had never been contingent on his approval. The helicopter moment hadn't really been about showing them anything. It had been about me, finally and completely, choosing myself and the world I had built. The shift in my family's perspective was just a side effect, not the prize. In the months that followed, we started to build a new kind of relationship. It wasn't the idealized, close-knit family from a storybook, but a more realistic, adult connection built on a foundation of mutual respect instead of obligation. Griffin and I remained distant, but civil. My mother became a more active, genuinely curious presence in my life. My father made stumbling attempts to understand my world, sometimes getting it right, and sometimes falling back into his old ways. I started new traditions that were true to my authentic self. I took quarterly retreats with the friends who truly knew me. I started a mentorship program for young women entering the tech field. I celebrated our business milestones with the same gravity as any other major life event. The acquisition of Cogni data was transformative for Etherian, launching us into the top echelon of tech companies. The following year, when we rang the opening bell at our IPO, I looked out at the sea of supportive faces and realized just how far I had traveled from that lonely table on the terrace. My story wasn't really about dramatic helicopter exits, even if they make for a good headline. It was about the quiet, persistent work of building something of value, both a company and a sense of self-worth that no one could ever take away from me by seating me at the wrong table. Family is always complicated. It's a messy mix of love and history, of expectations and disappointments. Reconciliation is rarely a clean, perfect process. But by choosing myself that night, I had permanently shifted the balance of power. I no longer needed their validation to understand my own worth. If you're watching this and you feel unseen or undervalued by the people who are supposed to be your biggest supporters, remember this. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to just keep building your own vision, whether anyone else gets it or not. Your value isn't a reflection in someone else's eyes. It's the foundation you build for yourself. Have you ever had a moment where you finally stepped into your own power with family or friends who just couldn't see your value? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please give this video a like, subscribe to my channel, and share it with someone who might need to be reminded that their path is valid, even if it's not understood by everyone. Thank you for letting me share my story, and always remember, the most important validation you will ever receive is the validation that comes from within.